Most Jews in this country now have at the back of their mind a question of, do we have a future here? But also there's plenty of people who aren't Jewish also wondering, what's the future of Britain look like? Do you think Britain will bring itself back from the brink, and in time? What do you think is going to happen?
The comeback story will either have to be very soon, and by soon, within the next 3 to 4 years, 5 years, some sort of revival. But if that doesn't happen, then the answer is a no. So this was Birmingham, and technically the second city of the UK. There was a football match, or as the Americans say, soccer, and where a bunch of far-left Antifa and also Islamist groups came to protest outside the stadium because their football team was playing against Tel Aviv, Maccabi Tel Aviv, and they didn't want the Jews to be there. They actually managed to ban the Tel Aviv supporters from being there, so that the chunk of the stadium was empty.
Okay, everybody, we are joined by the man I refer to as the king of YouTube, Mahyar Tousi, who is a British Iranian YouTuber with a massive channel online called Tousi TV. He's got over 1.2 million subscribers, has a massive channel and produces daily content on the news coming out of the UK, but also America and across the world. And people go to Mahyar because they're seeking sane commentary on the issues of the day. He also produces documentaries and other content. And aside from that, Mahyar has really been, to me personally, I call him the YouTube king, because he has been a bit of a real teacher to me, and just a bit of a role model in explaining how to best get the message out, best make the most of YouTube. So I'm been really grateful to him. And I have to say to you, Mahyar, you've been really generous to me with your time and advice. So super grateful for that. Thank you so much for joining.
Thank you so much. We've been meaning to do this for a while. I've been all over the place, but great to be on now.
Great. Well, there's plenty to discuss. And the first thing I wanted to talk about with you was you decided to go on a little adventure recently, a little further north from London to Birmingham, because for those of you who aren't clued in, now Mahyar, we have quite a big American audience, quite a big audience outside of the UK. So just to clue people in, if you know what, why don't you clue people in, and then we'll show people a little clip.
Yeah, so this was Birmingham, and technically the second city of the UK. There was a football match, or as the Americans say, soccer, and where a bunch of far-left Antifa and also Islamist groups came to protest outside the stadium because their football team was playing against Tel Aviv, Maccabi Tel Aviv, and they didn't want the Jews to be there. They actually managed to ban the Tel Aviv supporters from being there, so that the chunk of the stadium was empty. I went to see what's going on because they said if the Jews come, there will be protests and chaos and security, but the Jews didn't go, and yet there was still protests and chaos. I had to take security, the guy you see on the left-hand side of the screen somewhere, and
Wow.
so I was ready just not to provoke anybody. I said, I'm just going to go and film. Okay? I just want to show what's going on. Took me 2 seconds. That guy with the big beard came and started having a conversation because he recognized me, and things kicked off from here. We had a nice debate. We disagreed, obviously. It was basically rewriting history of Israel. And then there was a whole group slowly. You can see more of his friends turn up angry, and one of them grabbed me. And then the police threatened to arrest me. The police removed me from the scene. So that was the beginning of chaos.
Wow. What did you find the atmosphere was like there overall? Do you think it was as bad as some feared it would be? Was it less bad, and you think it was just an attempt to stop, basically just to boycott Jews and Israelis from going? What did you see with your own eyes?
Well, for those who are familiar with big cities like New York, like London, we always say these places are not safe, Chicago. But actually, when we got back to London the next morning, I was so happy. I wanted to hug the first Londoner. I felt safer in London. London
Wow.
style. Birmingham was a whole new level of chaos, and it didn't feel, obviously, firstly, it didn't feel actually not just English, but it didn't feel diverse. There's no diversity there because it's just one culture and one ideology dominating every street. And it was really intimidating, let's just say. But I mean, I'm used to it. But there were a lot of younger independent reporters, friends of ours who were there, and I was trying to keep an eye on them as well, because obviously I had security. You can see Emma Donwell next to me over there. Emma is a young reporter now, and young Bob from Turning Point UK was there. And yeah, he got arrested as well. So that was kind of fun. We had a Tory MP, Nick Timothy. He was almost arrested as well. But, you know, the other side
It's
can do whatever they
crazy that
want.
we're the ones that get arrested. I mean, what? It's totally topsy-turvy world.
It is. It's but not only that. Eventually, we had a group of pro-Israelis and from the Jewish community and the British patriots came to counter-protest when they realized what's going on. A small group, and the police decided to put them in a cage, as the counter-protesters called it, Jew pen. It was laughable, but it was also like, do they get the irony here? Why
Oh
are you
my
putting the
gosh.
Jews in a cage? It was really weird. Really weird.
So I have to ask this. You know, you're someone that literally sees all these issues that people know are happening in the back of their minds, but you're confronting it day to day on the front lines in the UK. Um, Most Jews in this country now have at the back of their mind a question of, you know, do we have a future here? But also, there's plenty of people who aren't Jewish also wondering, what's the future of Britain look like? Do you think Britain will bring itself back from the brink, and in time, what do you think's going to happen?
The comeback story will either have to be very soon, and by soon, and within the next 3 to 4 years, 5 years, some sort of revival. But if that doesn't happen, then the answer is a no. Eventually, obviously, things will change again. So Britain and the Western European countries will go down. Firstly, it depends who you ask. It's about someone's perspective. Obviously, if you ask
Mm-hmm.
someone like Jeremy Corbyn, he wouldn't see it as going down. He would see it as it's a better Britain. But I think if the revival doesn't happen soon, and that requires radical policies, actually promoting British values, and well, for every country, obviously, their own values, then I think it's not the end of the world in that sense, but the Western European countries that people knew in the 20th century, the nostalgia that people had in the 60s or 70s or whatever, or 50s, that's gone. That can't come back. But you can have a new, brighter future. But then that's difficult to see how it can happen without a a big change, which is on a geopolitical level, global level. I don't want to be a kind of doom and gloomy person, but it will either be the result of some sort of civil conflicty sort of situation. It doesn't have to be civil war, but civil conflicty tensions in each country, like in France, in Sweden, in Germany, in the UK, or some sort of world order change. Again, doesn't mean you have to go towards Mussolini, but maybe a fresh start, because since the days of the United Nations and the International Monetary Fund, the World Bank, we've been relying on that system, that everything's fine, everything is stable now. But it created complacency and corruption and everything else. You don't want to fall into the trap of the 1920s or 1930s. They say that, well, the system is corrupt, so we're just going to have a dictator. That's a terrible idea. But the good people need to rise up to actually come up with solutions. We see a lot of anger. We see a lot of protests. We see a lot of uprisings. We see a lot of people saying we need a revolution without having a solution. Revolution for the sake of revolution results in Russia, in France, after the, I would say, first revolution, and the second one, third one, and fourth one. Or Iran. We need grown-ups to actually be able to come up with some sort of solution, to say that, okay, we want a system change because we want this and that. You can't just say bring down Starmer, bring down the monarchy, for example, or whatever, without actually having an actual workable solution.
And what are some of the things you feel need to change? What are some of the policy prescriptions you think are necessary now?
Well, I think we don't have to come up with anything brand new. It's like, obviously, when Karl Marx was young and he was talking to his friends, they were saying, well, what sort of ideas do you have? Well, I have new ideas. You don't have to have new ideas. I still think that the previous system was working. What we say, for example, in Britain, conservatism, the same applies to the US, relatively speaking. Conservatism in each country, in each culture, at any time, conserves something. And in the West, we conserve what we used to call classical liberal values, or old English liberalism, which was basically democracy and free speech and free market and free speech and free trade and small government. Those values still work. You just have to go back to it. And you can only do it if you have sovereignty and if you have self-determination. So you have to promote each country and their flag and their borders. When people get shocked from the UK when they go to Israel, to Tel Aviv, and speak to moderate liberals in Tel Aviv, and they're still proud of their flag, because in the West somehow if you're a liberal you're told you shouldn't like the flag.
Yeah.
And then they get shocked when they go to Tel Aviv, even the liberals in Tel Aviv. I mean, even in the US until recently, moderate liberals still are proud of the US, the American flag. But these things
And
are
even the
changing.
liberals in Israel understand the need for borders.
Exactly. Apart from a small group.
The stakes are far too high.
Exactly. So I think this is the change that needs to be done. I think it's a cultural change, and it goes with raising awareness, education. Again, new media is helping, and obviously channels like yours and many others. It's not really top down. It's actually from the bottom up. It's a younger generation that the problem I mentioned with the moderate liberals in each country that's different. That's actually because of the younger people and what they're told from school and their parents and their communities. In Iran, in Argentina, in Brazil, it's the younger people when they come out to protest to show anger. And what they want is not more socialism, is actually capitalism. They want more freedom and more democracy. Whereas in the West, in the liberal democracy of the West, in capitalist countries, the young do the opposite. And it's just obviously it's a kind of obvious psychological thing where the younger generation are just going to rebel against the consensus and the status quo. But if the status quo is liberal democracy and capitalism, you can't just leave it there. You have to be able to keep promoting it, keep pushing it. People like Ronald Reagan, people like Margaret Thatcher, they kept pushing it, saying, we have these things, but we could lose it at any point. Whereas now it's just like, this is the system. Get used to it.
Yeah. I think it was the Reagan line: "Freedom's only one generation away from being lost." And are there I'm curious, any specific political movements or leaders in this country that do give you a sense of hope, that you think they don't have to be perfect, but are pushing in the right direction in your view?
Alive? Because I don't think so. No, not right now.
Really?
I mean,
no one?
No, I'm on a basic political level, party politics, technically speaking, you can still make an argument about Reform UK and Nigel Farage. Political culture, yes, but obviously they still have to play within the game of the system. They can't be too radical. But they're definitely not an individual, really.
So you actually think Farage wouldn't necessarily be that radical in government?
No. Well, also because he was never radical. So it was interesting.
Can you unpack that for us? Because most people viewing this would see Farage as a bit Trumpian, really radical, countercultural.
No, and it's not really an insult or a bad thing. It's actually a kind of interesting thing, because I think when Nigel Farage was, for years and years, when he was speaking out, he was charismatic, and all the other politicians were so polished and robotic, he would seem as a Robin Hood character. But let's not forget that he had one cause at first, which was to leave the European Union. Yes, obviously that is by default radical, but it's a very
not anymore.
Admin. Well, yeah, exactly. It was a very admin conversation. It was a very bureaucracy. It was very. It was a boring topic that he made it look sexy, but in terms of everything else, at the end of the day, he is what we call a countryside Tory. He's a countryside conservative. His mentality, and there's nothing wrong with it. We don't really have radicalism, perhaps because radicalism was never needed in Britain.
Is he not a radical Thatcherite / I don't know, Churchillian figure that he's painted out to be?
Well, Churchill wasn't a radical in that sense. Obviously, everyone knows him as the wartime prime minister. But in terms of domestically, he was not a good prime minister. So, in terms of his policies, but technically speaking, yeah, Thatcher obviously was radical for her time. But Nigel Farage, like many other politicians or politicos, have changed his mind a number of times on a number of issues. He goes this way and that way and goes back. So when he was younger, he was more of a Thatcherite. And actually, when he was younger, it was more National Front sort of thing. It's slightly more to the hard right. But obviously, then he grew up, then he became more of a Thatcherite, and then he's primarily been UKIP. That was his party back then until the 2010s. Between 2010 to 2014, there was a period where UKIP was perceived as a more libertarian party, primarily because they were talking about a couple of things. For example, let's criticize the Bank of England, for example. Nothing too radical, but still, that's it. But everything that Nigel Farage says, everything that he does, there is no radicalism in that sense. There's no conversation about, for example, actual mass deportations that even countries like Germany and Sweden are talking about. There is no conversation about the centralized banking system. There's no conversation about the tax code, and obviously being completely messed up, the high taxes. There's no actual conversation about the identity of the people in the country. These conversations are still a bit of a taboo in British politics. In the US, despite what a lot of Americans would see Nigel Farage as, he's sort of like, we're told he's like Trump because they're friends. But actually, he will be seen as an ordinary GOP Republican. He wouldn't be seen as a Trumpian in that sense. He doesn't want to say a lot of things that President Trump says, for example. There's nothing wrong with it. I'm not attacking him in that sense. But
do you think it's maybe because he just wants to play a game to get to power, and because he knows the state of British politics, rather than he genuinely has those stances?
No, he does have the stances. He's so a lot of people thought a year ago, when there was a row between Reform UK and Tommy Robinson, that Nigel Farage has thrown Tommy Robinson under the bus. So it's suddenly, now that he's back and Reform UK are doing well, he's attacking Tom. He's been consistent in his opposition against Tommy Robinson. Obviously, in my opinion, wrongly. But at the time, about 10, 15 years ago, 20 years ago, when Tommy Robinson was new, and even he would admit that he made the wrong moves because he wasn't an intellectual, he wasn't a political person, and also the media went after him immediately. I don't blame people, including myself, about 15 years ago, 10 years ago, for thinking, even a few years ago, thinking, Tommy Robinson is probably racist or probably a lover of Hitler. But then a lot of people started doing their own homework, saying, okay, he's not a perfect character, but he's not necessarily a fascist. But some of the establishment kind of minded people, including Nigel Farage, it's like they're still getting their information from the BBC 15 years ago. Oh yeah, but BBC told us that Tommy is basically Hitler, so he is. It's not true. I think that's the problem with the kind of old school political kind of mentality, or you don't really upgrade your information. And so my point is that a lot of people thought that he suddenly started attacking Tommy. No, he was always against Tommy. So I think it's just being seen more because he's now a leader of a major political party. He's now in the spotlight. Slowly people are seeing that, actually, maybe he's not a Robin Hood character. It doesn't mean he's bad, but he's not Julian Assange.
A quick message. We all hear about the Palestinian displacement, or Nakba, of 1948. But there was another, even greater displacement that we haven't been told about. Nearly 1 million Jews were expelled from Arab lands at the exact same time. Watch the trailer for our new and absolutely essential documentary called The Real Nakba. And if you want to watch the full film, just click the link below in the video description. We've all been told about the Nakba, the Palestinian catastrophe of 1948. Around 700,000 Arabs were displaced. But here's what you're rarely told. That displacement didn't come from some Jewish plan for genocide. It wasn't Israel's goal. It wasn't Israel's desire. It happened because Arab leaders launched a war of annihilation. They tried to wipe out the newborn Jewish state, vowing to drive the Jews into the sea. And in the chaos of that war, people fled. Many because their leaders told them to, promising they'd return after victory. But the term Nakba was originally used to describe the fact that the Arabs lost the war, not the displacement. Now the term describes the displacement of war used as a political weapon against Israel. But there was another Nakba you haven't been told about. A catastrophe rooted not in the fog of war, but in the clear, deliberate desire for persecution and genocide. It happened at the very same time, and it led to even more displacement. Yet most of the world has never heard of it. Over 850,000 Jews, more than the number of displaced Arabs, were driven from their homes across the Arab world. Communities that had thrived for millennia were uprooted overnight. Families stripped of citizenship, of property, of dignity, assaulted, expelled, forced to flee with nothing but their faith. Why? Because they were Jews. Because Israel dared to exist. Because the Arab League openly orchestrated it, drafting plans in 1947 to freeze Jewish bank accounts, seize property, and intern Jews as enemy nationals. This is the real Nakba, a catastrophe born of pure anti-Semitism. In this JTV documentary, we'll journey country by country, from Baghdad to Cairo, from Sana'a to Tripoli, uncovering buried truths and survivor voices. And no, this isn't a tale of victimhood, it's a saga of endurance, courage, and triumph. Because the Jewish people didn't just survive this Nakba, we rebuilt, we came home. In Israel, our phoenix soared from the ashes. So buckle up and let's dive in. To watch this JTV Plus documentary and access much more premium content, click on the link in the video description. And speaking of, what's happening on the British right, and also I mentioned earlier what British Jews are thinking about, and they're thinking about their future here. We know full well about the problems coming from the left, and this has been well documented. I think British Jews have done a really great job in fighting that, Jeremy Corbyn and Livingstone and others, and pushing Starmer on these positions. And, him, whether or not he agrees with it, he's been forced to moderate some of his stances and kick out some of the genuine anti-Semites in his party. But one thing that I'm sure you've been seeing happening in America is that the right is now starting to fracture a bit. And part of it is on, views of isolationism and that, but part of it's also just anti-Semitism and certainly anti-Israel views that's growing, the Candace Owens and Tuckers and certainly Fuentes and others. Do you think that something like that could start to infect the British right?
No, because even for America, because this is a conversation, these are questions, for example, that Ben Shapiro has been asked recently. I wouldn't consider, because obviously people change their views, and you can judge people based on their behavior rather than what they told you what they were. Like, Tucker Carlson could come and say, well, I was always conservative. Okay, sure, but what are you doing now? Are you actually behaving like a conservative? No. So people can change, rightly or wrongly. It depends on what people mean by right wing or to the right, because there are a number of characteristics. For example, if you believe in basic conservative values, if you believe in your nation and putting your country first, actually putting your country first, and when you look at the actions of people like Tucker Carlson and many others like them, when they end up picking the side of the enemy just because they're against the American government, I'm like, well, how does that work? You're not putting America first. You're actually putting the Islamic Republic first, for example. And you can criticize your government, but you can still stand with the flag. We had the same debate during the Cold War. You had people on the right. They didn't really go around defending the Soviet Union, even if they wanted to, for example, expose Nixon, for example, or anybody else. They didn't attack Nixon and then say, well, because of that, we're going to have to defend Moscow. So the issue we have is that many others, including like Nick Fuentes and others, I don't see them as to the right, because they never talk about anything that is about, for example, individual liberty or free market economics or basic conservative values, including, for example, if you believe in biblical values, or at least in America or Britain, when they say Christian values, then you're going around doing things that both Jesus and Moses would not approve. Let's just say, so they're not behaving like that. And so I'm not really sure why we should put them on the right, because nationalism in that sense, or populism as well, they were never back in the day a right wing or left wing thing, because you can be a nationalist and a socialist, but you could also be nationalist and a conservative. But now those who basically say, well, I'm going to say I'm a nationalist, so that means I'm right wing. Well, what about the rest of your ideas?
Well, fine. Let's not necessarily call them right wing or whatever, but there is a growing base that
Yeah.
subscribes to his views. And my question is, do you think that could happen? That kind of alt right could grow in the UK? And if you say no, which you did, why not?
In the UK, it won't come from the overall right. It will come from the actual the traditional base, which is the coalition of the socialists and the Islamic side. In the US, as you said, yeah, let's not just call it the right or whatever. It comes from the anti-establishment side, let's just say. And that's just because it's the American mentality. The Americanism is be proud of your flag, but also be anti-establishment. It's by nature. Sometimes that goes too far. So sometimes you're so anti-establishment you want to bring down the flag accidentally. In Britain, we kind of had that. With America or Americanism was partly the result of the British mentality. It was the Brits, it was the English for centuries and centuries who were resistant towards against authority. And
Yeah.
Magna Carta came from England. Before Magna Carta, we had governed by consent. But obviously then we kind of gave in to the kings. And then some of the people in Ireland left and went to America. My point is that we don't tend to have, there's no appetite in the UK
Yeah.
for the more right-leaning anti-establishment side to be successful with hijacking the anti-Semitism platform, because
I mean, I don't know
it's
if you know. Do you know Jada Franson?
yeah, relatively, yeah.
Yeah, so she was. I mean, she was like. She put out a video recently. She was part of Britain First, not anymore, which is sort of very, very staunch hard right, and was very, very kind of anti-Israel, slightly dabbling in some kind of anti-Jewish tropes. But this is very, very much on the fringe. So I'm just saying, it is there a little bit, but by no means is it at all mainstreamed, even in any way comparable to what's starting to happen in America. But I think it seems like that's the case right now, and it's almost surprising in a way, because I always thought America in some ways was a bit stronger when it came to sane political debate, and yet in some ways we're kind of seem to be a bit more stable over here.
I mean, relatively, but we're just going through a phase in the West of hyper anti-Semitism anyway. It's just a period of time. It's been going on since the Babylonian. It comes and goes. And it's usually when either the Jews, and that includes Zionists, and the Jews are either very weak and poor or very successful. So right now, Israel is successful, and people don't like it. So Jews get attacked, whether they are down or up. So, but when they're in the middle, they kind of leave them alone. And then eventually they come up or they go down. They got the blame for everything in Austria and Germany because a few of them were working hard to survive, and they were smart enough to become successful. And then at the other side, if it was literally the other way around, if the small boat was full of Jews who were poor and they were just coming to take benefits, for example, they would still get attacked anyway, because now that you're taking our money. And the Jews, obviously, if they take the money, obviously it's bad. If they give money, that's bad, because obviously they now get accused of giving us $7,000 per social media post, apparently. I'm still waiting for my check.
You're welcome. You're welcome.
And who came up with that number? They could have made it sound slightly more reasonable. Like, I don't know, maybe 70 shekel.
I interviewed this guy from PragerU a few weeks ago, Xavier Durusso. And he said, let me tell you something. If I was getting 7K per post, there would be signs. He said, I would post every single page of the Torah in every single language, day by day. But and then you wouldn't hear from me.
This is why it makes no sense, because number one, why on earth would Israel, for example, pay someone like me or Xavier? Because we already believe in those things. So you don't have to pay us. It will be a waste of money. I'm already saying nice things. Secondly, when they attack you, the anti-Semites, usually on the left, they say they don't know what they're attacking you on. They confuse their own attack. So there are two things you could attack someone like me on. You're saying the pro-Israeli things because you're getting paid. That's one way you could do it. Or you're saying Israeli things because you're evil. You're basically a Zionist supporter. So that's two different things. So am
Yeah.
I actually a believer, which means I'm evil, Illuminati, or am I just basically a puppet to get paid? So, but when they attack you on both things at the same time. So, wait, am I a puppet or am I actually a believer in Zionism? Because you can't do both. But then why am I getting paid then?
Well, that's the saddest, most tragic. Well, not the most tragic part, but the lamentable part about anti-Semitism is that it's so illogical and incoherent, and it's classic language of grievance culture, of scapegoating, of blaming culture. I'm curious, Maya. You have an Iranian background, and yet you've come to positions through your own accord, as far as I can understand, that is pro-Western, it's conservative and pro-Israel. How did you come to those positions? How did you get to that journey?
Well, it's actually thanks to Ayatollah Khamenei, because genuinely, the Islamic Republic's doing. Uh, when
Wow.
I was born, it was just after the revolution, and shortly after that paramilitary coup, ordinary people in Iran realized, oopsie, this is not good. And they immediately regretted that. And so what they ended up doing when my generation were born in the 80s and 90s and everything else, uh, inside each household, your parents would tell you, we live under dictatorship. What you say or do inside the house is different to what you do outside. And you have to be careful and don't trust them outside. What they teach you at school is a lie. And one of the things, for example, which was a norm in those cultures, just culturally speaking, it's the same in Turkey, for example, is casual anti-Semitism, which is kind of like just jokes and sometimes funny, actually. But so, for example, I mean, some of them make no sense. It makes sense if you know the history of the insult. For example, if I, as a kid, fall over and there's a scratch on my arm and I'm being a drama queen as a kid, your dad would come and say, "Oh yeah, that is terrible. I had a friend, I knew someone who was a Jew. That happened to him and he died." Because Jews are paranoid and like drama queens and like, they just died. So all those things were normal. But then your parents would tell you, you're going to hear these things in school. Ignore them. It wasn't just me to my own accord. We were raised like that. To people in Iran woke up after the revolution. They became even more pro-market and pro basically capitalism and pro-freedom because they realized what they lost, and they kept it
Wow.
in each
Wow.
household. I know it's a whole different level, but similar to centuries of what Jews and Hebrews went through, where their values had to be kept safe in the household,
Yeah.
including Judaism. Just keep it quiet, but keep it safe. I know that's a whole deeper level for the Jews, but it's the same thing on a smaller scale happened to the Iranian culture, saying, okay, well, we've lost the country, but we can keep the household. So
Wow.
we kept everything else. Everything became illegal, including partying or drinking or whatever, dancing or clapping or smiling, but we could still do it inside each house. So that's the reason. And now you can see a huge support for Israel inside Iran. My father, who is still stuck in Tehran, been held by the IRGC during the 12-day war. I was calling him on WhatsApp, obviously, to make sure it's encrypted. And
Wow.
he was calling me and was saying, listen to this. There were like sirens, and they were like, actually, they didn't do sirens because they don't want to alert people. There's no siren. It was just bombs being dropped. And he was saying, listen to this. And he was shouting, go on, Bibi, go on, Israel, hit us. I was like, what are you doing? And they
Wow.
were excited. They were saying, yes, go on, hit them, hit them.
Wow. So your family and presumably a lot of Iranians would have preferred if Israel had not stopped and Trump had not said, stop it, and they'd finished off the regime.
There was a
Presumably.
massive outrage in Iran. There were people who were angry, saying, "What on earth happened?" Because they were ready, because people in Iran, just like ordinary good people in Lebanon, when Israel says evacuate, they evacuate. They listen. So they left the city, like just go destroy them. And then they're like, "What happened?" I mean, I got my own theories about why that had to be stopped.
Go on.
Partly also because, from some of the stuff that I spoke to some of the IDF guys at the top ish. There were theories about it wasn't, it was perceived that President Trump forced us to stop, but actually, the Israeli government and the military needed some sort of breathing room because even one death in Tel Aviv is too much for Israeli government and the IDF. in Iran, they don't care. Like, you can kill hundreds. They don't really care. But even one death, it needs to be investigated. How did you allow an Iranian rocket to hit? And that was becoming a little bit irritating. Obviously, that's why the Islamic Republic are going around. So we defeated Israel. You didn't destroy Tel Aviv, but actually, from the perspective of the Israeli government, you hit them enough, and the defense was becoming overwhelmed. They needed a bit of a breathing room, a bit of obviously a debrief to find out, okay, so what's gone wrong. But they could have. The Israeli government and the Israeli
that's
military.
at the expense of. That's potentially a bit short-sighted.
Well, no, yeah, but in reality, for example, that's just part of the reason, by the way. But in reality, the Israeli military could have accelerated and escalated the attacks on Iran, even if that meant that 50 more people could have died in Tel Aviv or elsewhere. They could have done that, but they are slightly more moral, and they thought probably best to play the long game.
This is my thing. I question what is moral. What is the right thing to do? If 50 lives here, but then Iran can then rebuild, how many more lives are going to be in jeopardy? It's
well, this is the complication of the. Yeah, well, it's because the problem is the morality is difficult now when you live in the new world, the current world order, because everything's so intertwined. So you got the UN, you got NATO, and you got Turkey as a member of NATO. You have to have them considered. You have the Ukraine-Russia still going on. You have that to be considered. Syria is still new with Al-Jilani. You have to keep them basically close. All this, basically, everybody else around it, if it was just between Iran and Israel, that would have been a more straightforward thing. Like back in the day with Napoleon. England and France have a fight. Everybody stay out of it. Let's just let them fight. It doesn't work that way anymore. Everybody gets involved. So so that's the problem.
That's true. Are you concerned about Turkey and their malign influence, growing malign influence?
I would like to still think that there is such thing as some sort of dark, deep, secret state in the West that's running NATO, for example. CIA still and British Empire still there somehow behind the scenes, because nothing that's happening makes sense, including the rise of Erdogan. So I would like to think that the so-called deep state in the West, with the help of CIA and the Foreign Office in London, have a plan, or that they are keeping an eye on him, because it doesn't look good when you have a member of NATO basically openly saying that he wants the Ottoman Empire back. Like, it's a bit weird. So, but I think we are going to go through a phase of everything's going to change pretty quickly at the same time. A lot of these leaders are on their way out, whether by age or illness or accidental death. So everybody from Xi Jinping to Erdogan to Khamenei, all these leaders, they're not going to stay. In about 10 years, almost all of them are going to be gone.
True. It's a good point. I'm curious, what percentage of Iranians do you think share your views, and what percentage support the regime? Do you have any sense?
It's about 5% that support the regime. So, and that's
really?
That's still that's still a few million. But yeah, I mean, based on all the kind of data has been gathered based on different type of questions. Obviously, about 30% of, well, just less than 30% of Iran are practicing Muslim. People think that, well, it's called the Islamic Republic. That means 97% should be Muslim, but they're not. But
what else do they practice other than Islam?
So there is a big chunk that has basically been completely repelled from religion because of the Islamic Republic. They're just not religious. They don't believe in anything. There is a rise of Christianity, a massive rise. And the Zoroastrian movement, which was the ancient Persian religion, is also coming up a little bit. It's kind of hip. It's not really a big thing, but it's coming back for the younger generation. But that's it. So probably just agnostic, really. And the reality is that they're based on the other data, including questions about supporting government actions or the turnout of rallies, pro-government rallies. The estimate is about 5%, which is still about, I don't know, a few million people, 5 million people, something like that, just less than that. But I'm not surprised, but that number has gone down. So about 10 years ago, they still had, but they managed to brainwash a lot of the people who were more working class religious people to not be fanatics, but by default support the regime, because they were told, oh, America is the enemy, the Jews are the enemy, they want to kill us, we are the good ones. So a lot of people were defending the regime and government, but actually they've realized, no, the regime they don't care about us. Just like people in the Soviet Union at the time. They're like, well, they don't actually care about us. You keep saying America's the enemy.
Yeah, absolutely. It's spot on analysis, I think. My last question before we wrap up. You speak a lot about what's happening in British politics. How do you think the next few years look, particularly in terms of the current Labour government? Some are predicting that it's going to start to become untenable for Keir Starmer because he's got such a split party. Others say, no, he'll stick it out. You've got the rise of reform. What do you think the next few years will look like?
Well, when it was just about the rise of reform, I would have still said Starmer's going to stay and then lose. But it's the rise of the Green Party that's going to bring down Starmer. They're going to freak out. And so now we have basically Reform and the Green Party being the top party, which is really weird. So I know it's a bit of a hype. It's not real. It's a bubble. But the reality is Starmer will have to be replaced. And there's a few options. Some of them want to bring back Ed Miliband, which is an interesting option. But they don't really have good options, let's just say. And the next result, I don't do predictions, but my instinct says it will be a hung parliament, no majority for any party. And Reform could be the largest party. And then it depends who the second largest party is. Because if it's the Tory party, then that changes the game. That means the Tory party will be the opposition. But if the Tory party is a third party, then they can do a coalition. It's a very weird situation in the UK. It's different to like Germany or the Netherlands.
So the two largest parties couldn't make a coalition together?
Because it's in terms of British politeness, it's unconstitutional. It's perceived since Charles II. It's perceived as ganging up on the rest of the house. If the main two parties, they can technically, but they don't. And so
British.
It's so weird, yeah. But by that point, I think we're going to see the Tory party's rhetoric becoming more right wing. I know people still don't really trust the party right now and all that. They have no other option but to be seen more right wing.
It seems unlikely they'll be the second biggest party, doesn't it?
I don't know. That Labour are not doing too well. So
you think it could be that bad?
Yeah, I think because of the rise of Greens. If the Greens were not there, then I would still say Labour would be the second party. But the Greens are creating a big machine. They're being underestimated, but actually they could do quite well. But they could drain the Labour Party massively. But we'll see. You never know what's going to happen in the next few years.
So you think there's quite a good chance that Starmer gets deposed before the next election?
Yeah. I think I'll give it till probably not the next May local elections, but the one after, probably. So that's 2027, yeah.
Okay, you heard it here first, folks. Let's see what happens. Mahyar Tousi, thank you so much, not just for your time today, but for everything you're doing for the cause of promoting values and the best of Western civilization, speaking out for Israel as well and the Jewish community, and to try and save Britain. You're doing fantastic work, and as I say, you're such a role model to me in terms of the way you do things. Love it. We love it. Am Yisrael Chai. And let's hope also that Iran too can be liberated from its terrible despotic regime, and we can restore once again Iranian-Israel relations which, by the way, goes back a very, very long way. You know, it was Persia that basically helped fund and make possible the rebuilding of the temple. So who knows? Who knows what can happen moving forward?
Thank you so much. Cheers.
Imagine you're running for your life. Your home is no longer yours. Your neighbours spit at you in the streets. The government has branded you an enemy, stripped you of your rights, your livelihood, your humanity. You're a Jew in Nazi Germany, 1938, and the world knows your people are being crushed under Hitler's iron fist. You're desperate, clutching a suitcase with everything you own, praying for a visa, a ticket, a country, any country that will let you in. Now imagine this. The world's most powerful nations gather to decide your fate. 32 countries meeting in a lavish hotel by a serene lake with the power to save you, to save hundreds of thousands like you. And one by one, they say no. Welcome to JTV. I'm Ollie Annersfeld, and today we're diving into one of the most gut-wrenching, shameful chapters in modern history, the Evian Conference of 1938. This was the moment when the world had a chance to stand up, to open its doors, to save countless Jewish lives from Nazi persecution, and turned its back. This is a story of hope dangled and then snatched away, of sympathy that never became action, of a failure that paved the way for the Holocaust. We'll uncover every layer of what happened at Evian, why it unfolded the way it did, and the chilling warning it holds for us today. This is not just history, it's a mirror, forcing us to confront who we are when the world cries out for help. To watch this JTV Plus documentary and access much more premium content, click on the link in the video description.